Thank you so much, sir, for having me and giving me this opportunity to be part of this webinar. And namaskar to all of you. A very good morning to everyone. And before I directly dive into the topic, which is spirituality and education in Indian context, I would like to have a brief discussion on what is education and what does spirituality mean. So to begin with education, etymologically, if we go in the origin of this English word educate, then it comes from Latin word educare, which means to draw forth. So it is a direct hint which tells us that education means to draw out, which is inherent within us. So this is what education is, or we can say that education is to make something appear or develop what is latent in us, what is hidden in us. And the next, if we see this word spirituality, and if I attempt to define this word in one statement, then I can say that spirituality is a research or an in-depth exploration to find one's true self, one's real identity, who we are, the question, the thirst, which is in every one of us, that who we are, what is our purpose of life, what is the meaning of this life, where we came from, what is our origin. So this is spirituality, to have a research, to conduct a research, an in-depth exploration, as I have said, to find one's real identity. So after this short discussion, we can draw a parallel between education and spirituality, because education is also a, we can say, process to find the truth of or the logic behind the things. As in education, the person is student who wants to know the concept or to seek truth by applying certain techniques and formulas to understand any concept or theory. And in spirituality, there is a seeker who also uh, tries to understand, or who wants also, who seeks to understand the truth of the things, the real nature of the self and the world, the reality of the self and the world. So in seeker and student, there are similarities, and it leads us towards the similarity between spirituality and education, because student and seeker both have scientific temperament. They don't believe in anything. They research, they both promote inquiry, discipline, and inclusiveness. So this is what I have tried to explain, what is education and spirituality. And next, if we read this statement, self-explanatory, which tells us वही जो बंधनों से मुक्त करे. Knowledge is one that liberates us. So it is telling the fact only that spirituality lies at the core of education, because vidya wahi jo bandhanon se mukt kare, which liberates us. And in spirituality we find liberation from our conditionings, from the coverings, and we attempt, or we aspire to see the things as they are. So if we see ignorance or avidya, then it is the this is ignorance, when we don't know our true self. Or if we apply it in education, when we don't know, when we don't understand the concept of the things, it causes sufferings and bondages. So the knowledge through education, through spirituality, the knowledge, the gyan, it leads us towards liberation. Or we can say liberation is possible only when we have knowledge, when we have uh, realization, what is the truth, what is the truth behind the coverings. So the spirituality, as it is written on the screen, in spirituality we understand, or we seek to understand the real nature of the world and of the self. So in the education, so we can very well sense here that there is a very good correlation. They are very much correlated, spirituality and education. But what is going on nowadays? There is a general tendency when uh, nowadays in contemporary times, people think that spirituality is something which we will practice in later part of our life, preferably after retirement. So it is very surprising, because the spiritual guidelines, the spirituality which tells us how to live life, how to lead our life, how to take charge of our life, if we try those all solutions or guidelines of which we get in spirituality, or which we get after certain realization, if we miss that aspect of our life, that higher aspect of our life, in that phase when which is the most active part of our life, then what is the use? Or we can't get the full extract of our life, we can say, if we reserve it in the later part of life. So this is what education and spirituality I was talking about. So if we see it in the special context of Indian education system, then our ancient Indian education system has broadly divided the knowledge into two different kinds. It is also prescribed in Mandukya Upanishad, which divided, or which we can say categorized knowledge into two parts. The one is Paravidya, and the second one is Aparavidya. If we see Paravidya, then it is displayed on the screen. Paravidya is related to all the Vedas, grammar, philosophy, astronomy, astrology, and all such knowledge falls in the category of Apara, or lower learning, which they called lower learning, because it consists of textual knowledge. It is related all about, we can say, how to earn a living, or how to learn some skills, so that we can fetch degree, or we can have good job, and we can how can we earn more and more in the present context, if I say, because uh, this is somewhat which is related to our survival, the rudimentary aspect of our life, apara or lower learning. And the next one, if I read it, then that this is Paravidya, which goes thus: that knowledge by which Brahman or Supreme Soul is known, that by which the unseen and the unknown, the one eternal, all pervasive being is known, is the Para or higher learning. So after reading it, we can sense that it is something which is directly related to our self, our soul, our Atman, which is consciousness, which is eternal, all pervasive. And if we understand this aspect of our life, that we are, what are we exactly? We are not just this lump of flesh and blood, or we are not just this mind which is just a tool in our hand. It is an instrument which we need to use correctly, so that we can lead a proper, successful, good life. We can have a full-fledged life experience, but we are not this just this mind and body. These all sorts of things we learn in spiritual education, which we also call, or which was called in our ancient Indian education system, para or higher learning. And for the better understanding, I would like to share a few excerpts of this interesting story, which is in Chandogya Upanishad. This thus displayed on screen. I have written this. So it is when Narada once approached the sage Sanat Kumara and requested him to show the path of knowledge. And Sanat Kumara said, "Let me first know what you have already learned. I shall then teach you something further than that." And this is how Narada replied. And I have written the whole answer, because I didn't want to miss any line, because this is what these are the lines which these are this is actually dilemma of Narada, which is very well showing our own dilemma and ambiguities of our life, that despite having everything in life, despite having a full knowledge of all the material things, we are so experienced, and we are so intelligent in materialistic way, then too the sorrow persists. Then too we are not coming out of the sorrows. Societies are rampant. Societal tendencies are very much prevalent, and even criminal and violent pushings are also in hike. So these all lines I have written to tell or to convey that how the man of all the knowledge related to aparavidya, lower learning, is still in the state of discontentment. So what Narada said, sir, I have learned the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda, the Samaveda, the Atharvaveda, history, and traditional stories, which are together called the fifth Veda, the method of remembering and repeating the Vedas, the technique of Shraddha ceremony, grammar, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, astrology, science of augury, jugglery, logic, ethics, information, and different about different gods who represent different forces or powers, science of animals, science of war, and so on. But, sir, I feel that I merely know the mantras or potent words, but I do not know the Atman or the soul or the spirit of things. I have heard from man like you that he who knows the Atman goes beyond all sorrow, as we have read in the second slide, that knowledge is one that liberates us from all the sorrows and sufferings. Sir, I am full of sorrow and grief and remorse. I hope and I believe that you will be able to lead me out of all these by favoring me with real knowledge. So this was the reply, and there was a long discourse between Sanat Kumara and Narada, and then this is what I have taken the few dialogues by Sanat Kumara at the end of the discourse. So Sanat Kumara said, the spirit pervades the four quarters. The spirit, the soul, which is the real essence of our identity. This is that which pervades the four quarters. It is up above as well as down below. It is called the Atman. He who knows this Atman is absorbed in it. He sports with it. He enjoys its company as that of a mate. He is full of joy. He is his own monarch and fully self-possessed and self-controlled. So this in this dialogue we can see that bliss, that truth, that consciousness, that sat chit anand, the state of fully blessed, when we identify ourselves with the spirit, with our existential truth, with the core of our being. So this is the state, and this core of our being is it is clear, I think, that it is not at the mercy of some hormonal ups and downs. It is not at the mercy of hormones. It is itself a bliss. So this is what here we find the relevance, the rationale of spiritual education, which is paravidya and which was incorporated in our ancient education system, uh, and now which is not taught in our present system of education. And then the next dialogue, this realization of the spirit can dawn upon us when our mind is clean and pure. Our mind would be clean and pure when we feed upon pure food. A clean and pure mind alone can concentrate upon truth. Truth then will shine in the heart of hearts like the rising sun. So, after this dialogue, we can also find the significance, the relevance of certain moral disciplines which were taught to students, to learners in Gurukul, in the proximity of their gurus. Certain observances and basic restraints which they used to follow, they used to practice in order to keep their mind pure, because it is the pure mind which can transcend to the higher reality. If mind is cluttered with all sorts of attachments and emotions, then it can't transcend. That's why pure mind is here for Paravidya. Pure mind is recommended. And this sort of a spiritual education is not was an institution which is for some elderly group. It was very part of education for the students, for the learners who were in their formative years, because education is the most active ingredient which which can help, or which can help us, or which can function our mind in a particular direction. So this is the significance here. We can find that why the students used to follow certain rigorous course of discipline and practiced celibacy, because it is the pure mind which can transcend. And that we also in proper terminology we also call tapasya. What is tap? If we, and we also know, we all know that in science, whenever we give heat to anything, then it goes to the next level. So same in tapasya. We when a person practices certain or follows certain disciplines and rules and regulations, then it makes his mind, it makes the energy capable of moving to the next level. And what will happen when we will transcend our mind? Because we are not this mind, we are not this body, we are functioning through this body mind complex. Then when we will be able, when our real identity will be able to transcend this body mind complex, then only we will understand our true identity. And that is what? That is full of joy, that is monarch, that is self-controlled. It is not at the mercy of any hormone, it is not dependent on anyone, it is giver. So here we can find so many so many things which we can by which we can understand the logic of behind our ancient education system. So that is Paravidya, or spiritual realization that bestows immortality and eternal bliss, which tells that you are not just this body. Because see, if we understand, if our understanding is this much that we are this body, then tension is obvious, because our body is subjected to death, old age, decay, and so many ailments. So our tension is obvious that we are just this body and we will die, and we will have diseases even we don't want it. But it is that this spiritual orientation which used to inculcate, which our ancients used to inculcate in the learners, in the formative minds, so that they can understand that you are not just this body. You are a spirit which is immortal, which is an eternal bliss, which is all pervading. You are not limited. So this is what they used to learn in through their education, apara vidya, which was also important. And here I would like to add that in ancients were not only teaching this paravidya, they emphasized highly over the importance of both the knowledge, Paravidya and Aparavidya. Especially in Isha Upanishad, we can find the proofs for this thing. They don't say they didn't say that they are mutually exclusive. We can exclude one thing. They recommended, or they suggested, or even they uh, used to teach in with proper or with full vigor and enthusiasm both the vidyas, not only one vidya. Next, if we see our material education, then material education is what? It is fully through material education. What can we do? As we have already discussed, that how to make a living, how to have a good job, how to earn more and more. And what is spiritual education? Spiritual education teaches how to live, how to have a full-fledged expression of life, how to uh, have a life in its full scope. So these both education are equally important, but in today's education system, as we can find that it is very partial and distorted, where only material education is overemphasized and spiritual education is something out of syllabus. It is not given even proper attention and importance, or even it is discarded by saying that it is something for meant for philosophers and sannyasis. So here there is a very beautiful example now I can recall, that in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna is teaching Arjuna, or he is guiding Arjuna, who is a man of action. He is guiding Arjuna how to be spiritual in daily life. So it is not only for some certain strata of society which who are man of renunciation. It is for everybody. it is for we, because uh, we all are in whole, not a body and mind. We are not just material, we are spiritual too. So how I function, don't know subject. What I want to convey by this, that if you don't know that who you are, what is your true identity, how you function, if you don't know your subject, then how can you do justice with the objective world? At first you, so that was the emphasized in our ancient education system, that you must know yourself before knowing anything else. There should be a clarity about your functions, that how your mind works, how your body works, which orientation are you, which are what are your vrittis, what are your sanskaras, and you must have a sharp, refined, and a chiseled conscience which can discriminate between right and wrong. And this practice they everybody used to do in ancient system of education. So this was a note, as I have told you, not a particular type of persons. And how can we know how world functions if we don't know our real identity? And in these all are the problems, or which is a lacuna in our present system. So the only solution also lies in education system only, that is academic apparatus. We should incorporate this element in our academic apparatus. And it is a good news that nowadays new courses like contemplative studies and value educations are being introduced in our education system, and it is a good news. But then too, still it is not at a proper understanding, or it is we have not understood, or we have not reached that point where we can say that yes, now the situation is in control. Because we can see it in our surroundings. The situation is out of control actually. Minds are erratic, and daily we can listen or see the news of uncontrolled behavior, uncontrolled, the outcomes of uncontrolled mind. And so if I again state education, then it is actually expanding one's horizons. Education is not stuffing some information into the student's mind, or it is not a mere collection of information. For this we have Google. So education is expanding one's horizons, or to teach the person, or to tell the person that you are not just this body. So it is to uncover, or it is to uh, we can say it is to remove all those veils or coverings which bog us down and compel us to think that I'm this much. So this is education, where we can expand our horizons, and we can feel the real bliss of our existence. But education today, how it is how to feed industry, how to, or I say, how to exploit someone or something at its maximum level. This is education today's day, how to serve this and that in economic way. And what are the outcomes? What are we getting? We are getting a huge lot of depressed generation, which is a massive failure of today's education. Uh, Students enter in institutions, educational institutions, with a confused mind, and they depart or exit from the educational institutions with more confused minds, because they are getting one aspect of their life, or they are understanding the physical science, the physical, which deals with physical matter, but they are devoid of their own subjectivity, their own true essence. So our educational systems is thus in which trade and money governs the psyche. And we can think that does all the PhDs, it doesn't matter how many PhDs we have, if we don't know how our system functions. So it doesn't matter that how many much we have taken advance in material way, until we don't know how our system works, or how what we are, or how life is. So everything goes in vain. Every attempt goes in vain. So the proper understanding is required, which can be possible by the holistic growth of mind, body, and soul. And the next is I have written these objects of human pursuits. Actually, our ancients understood very well that self-knowledge is the basis and support of all other branches of knowledge. That's why they taught that ultimate goal of human life is not material. It is dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Ultimate goal is moksha. Everything is dharma, artha, kama is necessary, but they are secondary. Ultimate goal is moksha. Now, moksha is emancipation, liberation, or release, not after, just after the death. That also requires. But before that death also, we need release from, as I have discussed, release from our conditionings, which just locks us in a certain format or a certain framework. So that moksha can be possible when we transcend our mind and when we understand our real self through spirituality, and spirituality incorporated in education, because it should start from the very starting or beginning of life, not in the later part of life. At that time, what is the use, if there will be use, but then too, we have not taken a complete extract of life, or we have not lived our life. There will be so many regrets at that time then. So spiritual life is not to ignore life, but to live life. So it is spirituality. It should be understood well, and we should implement, or we should practice it in our life. It is not a belief system. It is not any ideology. It is not any philosophy. It is a matter of realization, which we should inculcate in our students and in ourselves too, because the moment, or if we don't realize and if we are preaching, then that will be not of any impact, because children don't listen, they imitate. So now I would like to have a very brief, I can say briefly, I want to tell something about the Gurukul system. Uh, the one of the famous systems of education was the Gurukul system of India, and it is well known that many uh, people or many learners from all over the world used to come India for quality education. And Gurukul is actually the home or abode of the teacher, which is a center of learning where pupils come and complete their, they resided, they used to reside their Gurukul, at the Gurukul, till their education got complete. So this was the Gurukul system. Now, what is the rationale, or we can say logic, behind this Gurukul system, where a learner has to live with their teacher, in the proximity of their teacher, not at their home? And even at that time, king had to study in Gurukul. That was the education, our education system. So it was why, because it was based on this idea, on this premise that teaching is not telling something, it is transmitting your enthusiasm. So the teachers, it was the premise that the teachers of renunciation, or the person of great renunciation, could inspire the teacher. So the teachers also used to have the realization, a proper realization. Then they were actually in the ancient system, teachers didn't were not in the habit of just teaching. They were to help the students to live in the present time, and they used to open their minds to inquiry and uh, inquiries and questions. And at first, teachers provoked their inquiries and questions, their vexing questions of their life beyond their books, and then the teachers only used to seek mentorship of those students. So in this way, this Gurukul system, or this Gurukul, was meant to provide a very conducive and vibrant atmosphere for learning, for teacher and for student as well. As teachers were also not in not that of that state, or we can say their orientation was such that they at every moment their aim was of learning through their, even from their students. So this was, such was the orientation, that man of renunciation could teach, inspire, culture and nurture higher aspects of life. That's why a man of realization and renunciation who can transmit their enthusiasm to the student were the teachers. So not just the teacher, this was the foundation of our culture, not just the teacher, the teachers of spiritual orientation, a teacher who have himself realized the life in its real sense, who is watching the things in its as they are, not with not covered with prejudices, or we can say some doubts and ambiguities, who is all, who has already gained some sort of clarity in their mind. They used to be teachers. And this is also, this also we know that values are not to be taught, they are to be caught. That's why in Gurukul system there was this environment where students or learners used to imitate or used to be influenced by the personality of their teacher, because their values are to be caught. They, you can't learn them, you can't teach it, because values come on its own when you realize it. It was based on this. So and nowadays what's going on nowadays? Values, students have to follow values because they have to, because it's compulsion on them. They don't know the logic of their values, they don't know the actual right and wrong, but they have to, because they will be in trouble if they don't follow. So if we think it, that if you are uh, if you are under any force, or uh, a force or any outside instructor have to be uh, on your head so that you can validate your values, then are you human being? You are not human being, because you are not charge of your life. So that's why values are not to be taught. If you tell any student that you should do this, they will do, because of they have the fear of punishment or etc. They will not get the degree at the end of the session, this and that. But they this is not that they are realizing that values. That's why values are in our ancient system of education, values were to be caught when they realized it to the to with their heart and soul. So in this way, through education, at first there was a course of discipline, as I have told you, that they have to follow certain rules, but it was not ultimate. And this discipline leads them towards self-discipline, because they realized uh, their conscience was chiseled by these practices, and they could generate a very deep insight or sense of right and wrong. And they were in charge of their life, they knew what is right and wrong, or they could sense the good and bad aspects of their life. So it was just like that, that you have the propositions, and then you have to verify it with your own experiments and realizations. It was very experiential, and then you understand it. It was not imposed, it was not told. So such was the grand system, or a very, we can say, impactful system of education in India. And if we see the contemporary times, then its situation is very horrible, because our life has been pendulously beset between material advances and decadence of spiritual and moral values. And the onset of this corona pandemic has brought this to be or not to be situation, we can say, in greater importance, because it has more emphasized these introspective inquiries, like who am I, where I came from, what is my origin, and what is the meaning and purpose of my life, where I will go after death, and how can I discriminate between right and wrong. So these are things which are within us, which we have to draw out. So this was a system which was meant to draw out the full potential of the learner. This was the system. And in such a scenario, when dilemma is on its peak, ambiguities are very high, then we can say that life is in full disarray. But but we can balance it by revisiting our spiritual and education, or we can say Indian education system, which was having spiritual education, its integral part. So, and one more thing I would like to say at the end of this session, that we also need to readjust, tweak, and realign our future visions with this treasured wisdom of India, Indian education, or we can say, then only we can create a fulfilling, invigorating, and rewarding life. So this was what I have tried to share about Indian education system, ancient India education system of India, and spirituality as its integral phenomenon. So this was what I wanted to share. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening me so endearingly and patiently. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I hope everybody must enjoy this session. Rupali ma'am has accelerated our previous resource person Jagannatha sir talked about the jnana, the concept of jnana. And here in this session, Rupali ma'am correlate the jnana with the education and spirituality. No doubt that spirituality and education must go hand in hand, and both are having the scientific temperament. Rupali ma'am has rightly pointed out in her session that the role of education and spirituality in the Indian context. With her simple language, she has elaborated the term Atma first. And she has talked about to achieve spirituality, our mind and thought must be clean and clear. You have rightly pointed out, ma'am, the role of spirituality is very important in education. Body and soul, though these are the two different objects, but one must consider that body is going to die. There is a curse to the body, but there is no curse to our soul. So, spiritual education teach all of us how to live our life. As far as the value education is concerned, in Indian context, educationalists must be rethink and shape the syllabus with the modern scenario. Rupali ma'am very boldly commented on current education scenario.